There is a story, whispered in dark corners and told around flickering campfires, that speaks of children who are not children at all. Their eyes are what give them away. Eyes as black as the void, bottomless pits where the light of life should shine. These are the black-eyed children, and those who encounter them are left with a terror that never fades, a fear that burrows deep into the soul and festers like an untreated wound. This is their story, or at least as much of it as can be told, for the true nature of these beings remains shrouded in mystery and dread. It begins on a cold night in 1996, in the small, unremarkable town of Abilene, Texas. The town was like any other, a quiet place where the greatest disturbances were the occasional barking dog or the distant wail of a passing train. But on this night, something far more disturbing was about to unfold. Brian Bethel, a local journalist, was sitting in his car, parked outside a movie theater as he prepared to pay a bill before the night's end. The streets were deserted, the theater's neon lights casting an eerie glow on the surrounding buildings. As he scribbled out his check, a knock at his window startled him. Looking up, he saw two boys standing just outside his car, their faces partially obscured by the shadows. They appeared to be around 12 or 13 years old, dressed in nondescript clothing, hoodies and jeans, nothing out of the ordinary. But there was something off about them, something that set off alarm bells in Brian's mind. It wasn't just their sudden appearance in the dead of night, it was the way they stood, too still, too stiff, as though they were unused to the bodies they inhabited. One of the boys, the taller of the two, spoke. His voice was calm, unnervingly so, as he asked for a ride. "Mister," he said, "we need to get home. We want to see the movie, but we forgot our money. Can you take us back to our house?" The request was simple enough, but Brian felt a wave of unease wash over him. There was something wrong with this situation, something deeply unsettling. His hand moved toward the door handle, almost against his will, but then he stopped himself. Every instinct screamed at him to keep the door locked, to drive away as fast as he could. But he couldn't move, couldn't tear his eyes away from the boys. And then he saw them. Their eyes, black as pitch, devoid of any color or light. No whites, no iris, just an endless darkness that seemed to suck in everything around them. A chill ran down Brian's spine as the boy spoke again, his voice now more insistent, almost demanding. "We can't get in unless you let us. Please, just let us in." Panic gripped Brian. He felt as though he were staring into the eyes of something ancient and malevolent, something that wore the guise of children, but was anything but innocent. He fumbled with the gear shift, his heart pounding in his chest, as the boys began to grow impatient. Their expressions hardened, and the taller one's voice dropped to a low, threatening whisper. "We won't hurt you. We just need a ride. Let us in." The command was almost hypnotic, and for a moment, Brian felt the overwhelming urge to obey. But then, by some force of will, he snapped out of the trance and slammed the car into reverse. As he sped away, he glanced in the rearview mirror. The boys were still there, standing in the same spot, their black eyes following him as he disappeared into the night. Brian didn't stop driving until he reached the safety of his apartment. Even then, the fear lingered, a cold dread that clung to him like a second skin. He tried to rationalize what he had seen, telling himself it was a trick of the light, a product of his imagination. But deep down, he knew the truth. Those were no ordinary children. He shared his story online, seeking answers, but instead found that he was not alone. Others from across the country, and even from around the world, had reported similar encounters. The stories varied in detail, but always carried the same unsettling core. Children with black eyes appearing out of nowhere, asking for entry, for permission to come inside. Those who encountered them spoke of an overwhelming sense of dread, an instinctive fear that told them to run, to escape at all costs. In many cases, the black-eyed children would knock on the doors of homes late at night, often during a storm or power outage, their pale faces illuminated only by the dim light of a porch lamp. They would ask to use the phone, to come inside and wait for their parents, always polite, always eerily calm. But there was something about them that set them apart from any normal child. Their unnatural stillness, the way their voices never wavered, and of course, those eyes, those bottomless black eyes. The stories often ended the same way. The person would refuse them entry, driven by a primal terror they could not fully explain. And once denied, the children would not argue or plead. They would simply turn and walk away, disappearing into the night as silently as they had appeared. But there were darker tales as well. Stories of those who made the mistake of letting them in. These accounts were fewer, whispered in fear, and often left vague, as though the very act of speaking them aloud might summon the children back. Those who let the black-eyed children into their homes spoke of a suffocating dread that filled the air, of electronic devices malfunctioning, and lights flickering ominously. Some claimed that once inside, the children would become menacing, their polite demeanor dropping as they issued chilling threats. And then there were those who never spoke of their encounters again, their silence leaving a void that only deepened the mystery. Over time, the legend of the black-eyed children grew, spreading through the dark corners of the internet and into popular culture. They became the subject of horror stories and urban legends, a modern-day boogeyman for a world that had lost its innocence. But for those who had seen them, who had felt the icy grip of their terror, the black-eyed children were not just a story. They were a living nightmare, one that could knock on your door at any moment. In the years that followed, sightings continued, each one adding another layer of fear to the legend. And while skeptics dismissed the stories as hoaxes or mass hysteria, the truth remained elusive. Who or what were these children? Were they spirits, demons, or something even more sinister? And why did they seek entry into our homes, our cars, our lives? These questions remain unanswered, lost in the shadows where the black-eyed children dwell. But those who have seen them know one thing for certain: once you encounter them, you are never the same again. The memory of those black, soulless eyes stays with you, a haunting reminder that there are things in this world that defy explanation, that exist in the space between nightmares and reality. And so the black-eyed children continue to walk among us, knocking on doors, waiting patiently for the moment when someone, somewhere, will make the fatal mistake of letting them in. And when that moment comes, when the door creaks open and the darkness steps inside, the true horror will begin. For these children, these beings with their eyes of endless black, are not seeking shelter or safety or solace. They are seeking you.